Hey, it's Jared with State of Tech. Let's talk about the two different size iPad Pros. These are both M1 iPad Pros from 2021 that were announced earlier this year. And for the last few years, I have been a larger iPad fan. Now, back when the iPad first came out and they had a large version, it just seemed kind of ridiculous to me. It was massive. I didn't want anything to do with it. But when Apple came out with the Magic Keyboard case, that changed my mind. I thought, you know what, I'm going to give a larger iPad a try because maybe, just maybe, it can become my laptop and I don't need to have a laptop. So I went with the bigger iPad, and with the keyboard, I instantly fell in love with it. It was just a fantastic experience. And though I don't think it can completely replace my laptop for the purposes that I use a laptop or an iPad for, it did come the closest that it has ever been able to come. So the last two iPads that I've had have been the larger iPad up until now, when I thought, you know what, I find myself not taking my iPad places with me very often, so I'm going to go ahead and try a smaller iPad, the 11-inch iPad, which, when you set them next to each other like this, does not really seem to be too big of a difference. But when it comes to mobility, it really is a big difference. So I'm going to briefly talk about, the technical differences here between the two, and then it's going to be more of just a discussion on how one is a little bit more practical than the other, except for in certain circumstances. So side by side here, obviously, one is larger than the other. Otherwise, they are almost identical when it comes to looking at them. There is some differences under the hood, and the differences are, of course, going to be the battery size. The battery size on the 11-inch iPad is significantly smaller. I'm putting the specs on the screen because I didn't memorize them, but it is about 1,200 milliamps different, I believe, and that's a pretty good size difference in battery life. The larger iPad could last me all day easily if I was using it, and even into the next day if I was using it for the entire day for things like email, web browsing, some YouTube, browsing, and then also listening to music or podcasts pretty much the entire time. The larger iPad was just fantastic. However, when it comes to doing video editing projects or website design, things that I do quite often, it's still a little bit tricky to use an iPad for that. And it's not the iPad in its form factor, it's the iPad OS software. So I found myself not taking the larger iPad with me as many places because it was just so large. To carry this thing around, it is quite heavy. I'm worried about it getting bent or having issues like that. It's just a lot to carry around, and a laptop is a little bit lighter than this, depending on the size of the laptop that you get. Also, a laptop still with a full operating system on it is easier for editing video and stuff like that. But as a photographer, I absolutely loved the 12.9-inch iPad for utilizing Adobe Lightroom. Most of the time I would take my iPad, I would plug in a USB card reader into the side of the iPad, and I would upload images and edit them right away. And that was absolutely just a great experience. But that tended to be the only time that I would take my iPad anywhere with me. So looking at the iPad here, of course, we've got the iPad Pro, large iPad Pro here with, the bigger display. The keyboard is a little bit bigger, just to kind of show you here, and I'll try to compare. This keyboard is a little bit more full size than the keyboard on the 11-inch. So if you're considering the keyboard as a decision-making factor, let's see if we could squeeze both of them into the frame here. You can see that there are things that are smaller, such as the return key on the 11-inch keyboard is super small. The plus and the minus keys here are pretty small. Some of the other keys get squished together quite a bit. And of course, the trackpad is a bit smaller as well. So when we have both of these up next to each other, they take up, the smaller one takes up a significant less amount of space because of the size of the keyboard. And I'm realizing that part of the bottom of my shot here is just a little bit cut off, which is unfortunate. But, the difference is quite drastic when it comes to mobility and just being practical. Now, both of these are essentially the same as far as specs go, configurable specs, such as the storage. They're both the 1 terabyte model. They're both the LTE model. Those are the options that I went with because I knew that I would end up sticking with one over the other, and whichever one I was going to stick with needed to be the LTE model. And so I ordered both of them like that. So this is a lot lighter. It's still heavy and dense. You think of the iPad as something that's really lightweight, and the keyboard case does add a lot of weight to it. I also did just recently a top 5 cases video for the 11-inch iPad Pro, and those cases are also available for the larger iPad. So if you want to see some case options that definitely would help decrease the weight, definitely check those out. Those cases were pretty decent. Some of them were okay. So definitely check that video out before deciding to purchase a case. So smaller battery on the 11-inch. I haven't ran into any problems so far there because I don't typically use my iPad for an entire day. If I utilize my iPad, I probably am importing some photos to edit. I will likely then maybe edit them and export them. I might post a few of them to social media or something like that. And maybe that's it. Maybe respond to some emails, type some things out if I wanted something a little bit more mobile, and I was sitting at a desk because the keyboard is just not comfortable, especially on the larger iPad on your lap. The larger iPad becomes pretty top heavy, and so when it's on your lap, it wants to just tip over. It doesn't have something totally solid. This is resting on your legs, and it just kind of wants to tip over, and it's just not the best experience as a laptop by the traditional sense. So I wasn't using this larger iPad as much as I remember using smaller iPads in the past. Most of the time I would get smaller iPads. Before the iPad Pro came out, or no, the first version of the iPad Pro, I think, was like they had a 9.7-inch iPad, and that was pretty much perfect for me. So, in looking at the 11-inch iPad Pro, I thought, I feel like maybe I won't end up liking the display because it's not the high-end display. There is a display difference as well between these two, which we're going to look at in a few moments. I was thinking when it comes to photo editing, I'm going to want that top of the line. I want that technology that's in Apple's $5,000 Pro HDR display, and that's what I need. But in moving to the 11-inch iPad, I found myself not really noticing the difference. Most of the time when I'm editing, it's out in weird lighting situations, daylight. I'm sitting in my vehicle after a shoot, or I'm in a coffee shop and the lighting is just kind of bad anyways, and that is going to affect the overall performance as well. So what I wanted to do, because I think really what it comes down to, besides the size difference of the iPad and the differences in practicality between the two, the main thing that people want to know is the bigger display and the this Apple display upgrade that they put in the larger iPad really worth it? So I'm going to do my best to get both of these iPads in the scene here, and we're going to look at some photos in Adobe Lightroom. So let's go ahead and open these up here and get into Adobe Lightroom. All right, so we also have a little bit of light spill situations here as well, so I'm going to do my best to look at these and try to fill in a little bit that might not transfer over too well watching a video here on YouTube. So right here is an image that I took with the Sony a6600. It's not a super high resolution camera, but it does take a decent resolution image, and I just accidentally unfavorited that image, which was a mistake. So we're going to move on to the next one, which is a lightning bolt that I was able to capture some of when we were in Glacier National Park. And so let's tap to get that full screen. So looking at this, the noticeable things are going to be in like the noisy areas or the sharp areas of the image. And this is a good image because the lightning bolt is about as sharp as you can get a lightning bolt when it is flashing through the sky and it is dark out. And so we can see some issues there just in the image, trying to capture those details. But when looking up close here at this image, I don't see much of a difference as far as the quality of this image. And so these images also are local on these devices, and so I'm getting the full resolution here as well. Here's an image of me out on a shoot, and so we can look at the details of the camera here. So we'll go ahead and zoom in. And it's not a total fair comparison here because this is higher resolution. So zooming in tighter on an image may result in it feeling like it's lower quality because I stretch out the image beyond the size of the actual image. So where these images look to be, kind of cropped on screen the same, they're being viewed in different resolutions. So what I really need to do is maybe keep this image around that size to have it be more realistic. So this is not scientific by any means, but I'm hoping to give you kind of an idea of the quality comparison between these two, which so far I'm not seeing much of any. So let's move on here to a food image. Everything looks really good in this image as well. So let me try to just hold this up a little bit closer here and give you a better look. So really good detail here in the almonds. I think the main focal area is like right in here. And so there's some real good detail. And if we get in really tight, which goes beyond the resolution of the image most likely, everything still looks pretty good. And, the noise, the responsiveness of the display here is pretty good as well. No complaints. Now let's move on over to the larger iPad and just kind of see what we've got here. So being that this is in Lightroom and it's kind of re-rendering this image as I move it around, and there are some things happening here that you might be able to see on the screen. But I mean, gosh, like down here in the corner where things are maybe a little blown out, just because there was so much light down here on this piece of ham, maybe that might give you an idea of highlights and shadows. I mean, I don't know. I just really can't see much of a difference here between these two screens, and I'm sure there is, but I'm just not seeing enough to warrant it being a decision factor here. So let's move on to an image that might be good for viewing angle. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of rotate the device here just so that, let's go ahead and turn off rotation on these so that they don't rotate when I hold them up. So viewing angle is obviously really good on this iPad. I mean, every angle that you have it at, it's going to look good as I'm kind of rotating it around. So if you're showing people images, or you're giving a presentation and everybody's kind of looking at the smaller display here, I mean, viewing angle is absolutely great. Let's move on to the smaller iPad and see if the viewing angle feels as good as the other display. So and it could come down to the brightness adjusting here a little bit. If I go max brightness, I just want to make sure that maybe I'm on max brightness. Okay, this one is on max over here. So I want to make sure that they are coming across in a similar way as far as brightness goes. Gosh, I mean, this is good too. This is really good, the viewing angles on this iPad. So I have zero complaints there. Let's just look at a couple more images. I don't want to beat this too into the ground. That really, it's not that big of a difference. And as a photo editor, I need the best quality that I can get. I want the best representation of the image that I captured. And to me, it's just not that different as far as both of these iPad displays go. I think both of them are absolutely fantastic. So this image here of one of my cameras, when I set the camera down, and I thought, let's take a picture of the camera. I mean, they're just, both of the images look really good, and there's lots of detail in both of these. Let's see if I can't maybe just pull in on some of the detail here. We could just compare these a little bit. I mean, they both look really good. So I don't want to beat the display difference into the ground. Obviously, the display is one of the big differences. They marketed it as a big difference. I've ran tests on both of these iPads as far as performance goes. The smaller iPad really only performs a little bit better. The Geekbench compute score is a little bit better, most likely because it's pushing a smaller display and it's not this higher end display. So there's a little bit of leftover resources for processing on the smaller display. So really there just is not much of a difference there. Yes, there is in the technology, and maybe even in the refresh rates and some stuff like that. Maybe there's a little bit of a difference, but I just I don't see anything that is going to make me choose the larger iPad simply for the display. I mean, even if you look at the text and stuff that's on the displays, there really just is not a huge difference there. So I talked about that a lot, and video is getting long, so I want to put an end to it. Buy an iPad that's most practical based on the use that you are going to be most frequently using this device. And for me, it is a portable device. I need it to be easy for me to take with me places, or I'm just not going to take it. The larger iPad became that. Unless I wanted to put it in a backpack, I just stopped taking it places because it was too large. Now with iPad OS 15, and the ability to do quick notes from the side, which I do have iPad OS 15 installed here, and quick notes from the side and all that stuff. I need my iPad to be practical as far as the size of the device goes, and a smaller iPad that is the 11-inch size is going to be the best option for me. And I think this is the iPad that makes the most sense for most people. Unless you don't have a laptop and you're making this your main computer, then you might want to go with the larger screen just because it's your only device. But if this is your intermediary device, meaning you have a computer and you have a phone, and this is your device that kind of lives in the middle, I do kind of recommend the 11-inch iPad Pro for most use cases over the larger iPad, because it just is an awful lot to tote around with you. So let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section below. I would love to hear those pros and cons of the larger, smaller iPad and your experiences with them, so make sure to share that with me down there. But that's going to do it for this video. Thanks so much for checking it out, and I hope to see you back soon. Take care.